morning, everybody. I don't know whether you are in the morning, whether you are somewhere else in the world. I know Flo from Singapore with some kind of sauce going on there. I know Flo sits in Singapore. I don't know where else you are, but I hope you're well. Thank you for coming here. Thank you for taking the time. Time is the only resource you have in life. You've decided to spend some of that time here with us. We really appreciate you. So my name is Joeri. That's a Russian name. It's basically pronounced like this, like Joeri. No, I don't know. Even the people around me sometimes don't know how to say my name. It's a Russian name. I'm not Russian. I'm full-time Dutch, and I live in Singapore. And I'm glad to be here to talk to you a little bit about a way to prepare for possibility for an unsure future. Dum, dum, dum. I've got a couple of props around me, which I may or may not pull in from time to time. Like, I don't know. Is anybody, are you old enough to remember this film? Anyway, please. Yes, okay, people are nodding. Cool. $5, somebody sold that in my neighborhood. I was like, that does not need to go to waste. I've got a couple of props around me. Before we do that, I want to share with you something else. So let's do this. You see my screen. I'm going to look at Dan. Make sure you can see my screen. Yeah, Dan, can we see the screen? Fantastic. Okay. Who remembers Y2K? I remember Y2K was a big thing that happened years ago. The year 2000 was going to destroy the world. Computers would go completely overboard. The servers would crash and the world would change forever. Does anybody remember what happened that night? Because all I remember, it was a bit like that. We had the countdown and everybody was waiting for a second and nothing happened. Exactly. So even the best experts in the world who said that this was going to be the end of the world, nothing really happened. Terrible, terrible predictors of the future. Except for a hangover, nothing really happened. Last year, 2020, what they like to call a black swan event. It's unprecedented. Nobody could have seen it coming. I know people around me who now say that, well, I saw that one coming, or we should have done this. Hindsight is always 2020 in this case, quite literally. Last year was a complete black swan event. Nobody could have seen it coming. Nobody could have predicted that one. In the chat, whose signature is this? Does anybody know whose signature this is? I want to make sure I can see it. Where do I see the chat over here? Can I see the chat? Oh, I can't see the chat. That's fine. If you don't know, this is a Gary Vaynerchuk signature. You can do what Gary Vaynerchuk does when it comes to predicting the future. What Gary V does, he's very in tune with what's cool and what's going on. And he just predicts a million different things. He says, this is going to happen. That's popping. And this is going to be hot. This and this. What you do is you predict a million different things. And then you focus on the ones that actually come true, because his success rate isn't that high, nor is the stock pickers or the weathermans. We are terrible predictors of the future. Okay. I'd like you to close your eyes for a second. I want you to close your eyes. Yeah, like right now, you close your eyes. That's okay. I'll keep my clothes on. Close your eyes. And I want you to go back 10 years. Just think about you 10 years ago. So think about you in 2011. And you don't need to answer, but in your mind, think about where were you at and what were you doing? Just think about that for a second. Who were you with? Were you with the same person? Were you with somebody else? What did you dress like? What's your hair look like? What were the top priorities of you in that day? Like what was on your mind? What did you want to be? All right, open your eyes. Now let me ask you a question. You can put that in the chat again. Let me ask you a question. 10 years ago, could you have predicted what you are like now? In other words, are you the same now? Sorry, 10 years ago, could you have predicted that you are where you are today? So was that clear about where you were going to be and what you are now? Just leave me a comment in the chat. Like how accurate was that? Just going to put that here because so you can see this. No, not really. Nope, not at all. No idea. No, okay. So point made there. Oh, this is great. Let me do this. So we can't because we are horrible predictors of the future. That's just my only point. We're horrible predictors. We can make all kinds of predictions. We can get experts in. We can, you know, ask the cleverest people in the world. The reality is we're not really good predictors of the future. And if we can't even do this for ourselves, how can we do this for bigger world events? Now, I know there are people out there who have expertise in, I think it's called futurism. I think that's a word. I used to work with somebody years ago who is a futurist. He gets paid to speak about future trends, and he does some really interesting stuff around big global meta trends. I'll leave you a link. I can't think of the link. I don't know who it is. I'll think of the link in a minute. But all this stuff is open source. It's all free for people to use. At the end of the day, we're terrible predictors. And the other one is, if you go by all the data that's out there, most of you, you're not Facebook, right? You're not Google. You may not have access to that same kind of data, the same kind of data sets and algorithms that other companies have. So that's just to say that it's just really hard. And that's just for us to accept. That is very hard to predict the future. But I do think you can get better at preparing for ambiguity. You can be better at preparing for opportunity. So what do you then if you are a small business? What we're going to be talking about today, some of you will notice already, this is quite a common practice. I'm actually amazed that not more people are doing this more often, because I think it's a fairly simple practice. So what do you do then if you're a smaller business? Well, first of all, what a lot of these people are doing, even a Gary Vee, what they do is observe, listen, and read. So you take data from left to right. Some of this will be qualitative data, some of this will be quantitative data. Ask yourself the question, what if? Interestingly, I come from a previous company I used to work for, is called What If Innovation. It's always a good question to ask. But asking yourself, like, what does this mean? What could this mean? Are you right? Can you prove that? No, probably not, because things in the future are very hard to predict. They're also very hard to prove. So ask yourself, what if? And I think my other one is do it frequently. I see that these big future days, looking at the future, strategizing, are often reserved for senior people, and it's done once a year. When I worked in a bank here in Singapore, it was that once a year thing with big stakeholders. It was a big conversation, but it was a once a year thing. And what I'm trying to tell you is this activity you can do frequently, on the go preferably, to get better at preparing for possibility, right? So can't really prove that's going to happen, but if that happens, can you quickly adjust it? Can you quickly move and tack your business to either jump at those opportunities or move away or minimize the risk? So far so good. Give me an exclamation mark in the chat if this is spot on. If this is interesting, let me know. If it's not, leave me a question mark, and that's okay as well. It's a nice variety of people here. Thank you for leaving me that. That's nice to hear. Is there any question marks in there? Like I said, we'll have a time later on to ask a couple of questions. Okay, so first of all, observe, listen, and read. This is just looking at data. Now, a lot of companies are talking about big data. I used to work with a big tech giant who have access to a lot of data. They have the budgets, they have the technology, and the access to a lot of data, which is again, which is cool if you're a Google, if you're a big company. But what do you do if you are the local coffee shop here in the neighborhood? I live in a very local neighborhood in Singapore, in Tiong Bahru. What if you're a local coffee shop? Or what if you run a little engineering company? Or what if you run a little coaching and training business? Like, how do you do this? You might not have access to the same amounts of data sets. And even if you do, the question is, do you know what to do with it? So I want to bring this down to a much lighter version. So a big caveat for me is this is a light version. You can make it as complex as you want, take some of the principles and get started. It's more a practice than an absolute answer. So observe, listen, and read. We're going to go through an example in a second. Observe, listen, and read. It's very simple. It's just like the data you can find left and right. This is about talking to different people. This is about reading different articles. This is listening to experts. It's about going online and watching videos. These are things that can be quantitative or qualitative data you can find quite easily. And the reason I'm so excited about this is because information has been commoditized. Years ago, when I worked in, let's say, in What If, So we were an innovation agency. For people who don't know, what if in the old days is sits in between, I guess, a business consultancy and an IDO, somewhere in between. And people used to pay us lots of money for insights, for understanding what was going on in the market. So I was in Asia, I was in London and in China. So people would pay us for all this information. The reality is a lot of this information nowadays is very easily available for many people. Because honestly, you can just subscribe to most newsletters. I subscribe to a whole bunch of newsletters. This information is available, where years ago people would pay for that. I think a lot of people don't have to pay for that anymore. And the reality is, I don't know whether there are any McKinsey people in the room, and I'm sorry to break it to you, but a lot of the McKinsey work I've seen, or Accenture work I've seen, or the BCG work I've seen is the same. And it's because they're getting their data from similar places. They're paying people, the same places like India, to write these reports for them. So you can spend $100,000 on a report. My challenge to you is, I think many reports, at least the ones that I've seen, is things that you could probably find yourself. So that's kind of my headline here. So if you just observe, and if you listen, you read, you can find a lot of that data. Like I said, I love to subscribe to certain newsletters. Of course, that depends on which industry you're in. But stuff is a lot more commoditized. And that's where you get your data from. So think about subscribing to industry-related newsletters, be part of forums. I like to use, what do you call it? Like kind of curated messages through Blendle, where you can set settings. I'm interested in knowing about tech. I'm interested in knowing about innovation. I'm interested about humanitarians. Is that a word? Yeah, humanitarian studies. Let's call it that. And you can get all that data right into your inbox. It's fairly easy. Then, of course, the magic does not come from the data. The data, like I said, anybody can get that. It's all about what you do with it. And that's why I often see lacking. People have all this data and they're very proud of it. But nobody cares about the data. Where does the magic come from? The magic comes from asking questions like, what if? Asking questions like, so what does this mean for us? Asking questions like, what are some of the implications of this? And in a minute, I'm going to give you an opportunity to do this. This is a little bit harder. This is a bit of a creative leap, because this taps into your imagination. This taps into your creation mind, into picturing what could be rather than what is. And this is where you can look further than what is now. So asking questions like, what if? That's where the magic comes from. I have a dentist appointment after this, by the way. I'm going to get roots removed. So if you do feel sorry for me at about 1 o'clock today. I just saw a little message pop up. So get your data, ask a question, what if? And then do it frequently. Like I said, I don't think this should be a once a year thing. One of the biggest challenges I see is that it becomes an activity from 9 till 3. It becomes that once a year workshop, and everybody gets in the room, and then everybody needs to focus, and there'll be facilitators, somebody like me, that tells them to get off the phone and has got all this data on the wall. And then, from 9 till 11, what we're going to do is going to go through the data, come up with opportunities of future scenarios, something like that. But it doesn't have to be that way. So if you do it more frequently, I think it's a muscle that you can practice. So you have easy access to the data. Go back frequently, go through the data, pick the interesting bits out of that one, or the more validated ones. There's different ways of doing it, and then do that frequently.